What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast. Now, I'm Alex. I'm once again joined by Tyler. We're back for another video on our Spider-Man Far From Home community series. Now that we have seen the movie, now that the movie is actually out in theaters, we're ready to start talking about this film, talking about the main, the critical points of this movie, and also going ahead and talking about the future Spider-Man movie. So we got a lot of these videos going to be discussing the future Spider-Man films. We're going to be covering this movie for about the next week, almost a video every single day. So if you guys like that, make sure you guys subscribe and hit that bell icon, because there's going to be videos daily on Spider-Man. Now, we want to start off by talking about the Green Goblin. We're going to be, jumping into a little bit of spoilers. We're going to be starting that right away. As soon as I give it to Tyler, we're going to talk about what was/wasn't at the end of Spider-Man Far From Home, and then talking about why we believe Green Goblin needs to appear in Spider-Man 3, how that would happen, how that's connected to Norman Osborn, all that kind of stuff. So if you guys don't want to be spoiled, and it's not even that big of a spoil, but if you guys don't want that, turn away now. So Tyler, why do you think Green Goblin needs to be in Spider-Man 3, especially considering what wasn't shown at the end of Far From Home?
Norman Osborn obviously is, Norman Osborn and Green Goblin is Spider-Man's biggest rival or biggest villain. Some might think it's Venom, some might think it's the Sinister Six. You technically wouldn't be wrong if you think the Sinister Six. You wouldn't be wrong about Venom either, but you would be in the case of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because this Venom for Sony is a very different Venom than we got in Spider-Man 3, Sam Raimi's. Venom in general in the comics. This is more of an anti-hero Venom, so it's not exactly, it's not exactly this version of Spider-Man's biggest rival. So that leaves you with Norman Osborn, Green Goblin, and the Sinister Six. Now, if you think about Norman Osborn, he's kind of like Lex Luthor, in a way. Norman Osborn is likely going to be someone who has a lot of either political power. I personally believe he will have a lot of political power on top of money. He'll have a lot of pull, I think. I think he's going to be... I think Marvel's going to set him up. Marvel Studios is going to set this Norman Osborn up to be problematic for the Avengers and for Earth, really. So that's how I'm seeing it. So because of all that, you have to introduce him, obviously, at some point. But because he's such a kind of like overarching or like kind of has like a bigger scope type villain, I don't think that's somebody that you introduce in like the fourth Spider-Man or the fifth Spider-Man, because they want to make at least 6 Spider-Man films. Kevin Feige said that Spider-Man's going to be like their Harry Potter, which I like that. But because there's going to be 6 films, and obviously everything's interconnected, it's not just Spider-Man. Spider-Man has everything to do with the Avengers. He is an Avenger. Everything connects now. So because of that, you can't hold off on a big... At least I don't think... If they do, I think it's a mistake. Because I don't think you can hold off on a villain like that and limit them to only one movie, which I think Marvel tends to have a problem, and we're going to talk about that in a totally different series. But they have a problem where they kind of do this one-and-done thing where that's not going to really work with Norman Osborn. I see Norman Osborn more as a Loki type, completely different, but Loki type villain where, not only is he in the Thor movies, in multiple Thor movies, he's actually in every Thor movie, but also in a few of the Avengers movies. So I think that's what we're going to get from this Norman Osborn is I think he will be introduced in 3. Maybe even towards the end, but I think he will be introduced in 3. I think he will possibly become the Green Goblin at the end of 3. And we're going to connect in another video with Miles Morales. But I think towards the end we're going to get a couple different sequences where Norman's turning into the Green Goblin. Miles, maybe he's getting something, but we're going to save that for the next video. But I think we're going to get something like that where it's really going to be setting up where in the fourth Spider-Man film, it's really going to be like, it's going to be almost a whole new ball game because there's going to be so many new elements, which is awesome. But having Norman Osborn as someone who has a lot of power through money and through like political power is a villain. Literally, like, you know, he's got powers. Those type of things, that does set him up to be very problematic, where maybe he really wants, for whatever reason, he really wants to take down Peter Parker and Spider-Man. And maybe he's the one who funds the Sinister Six. He's the one who will be funding possibly many other things that might affect the Avengers. So because he's that type of character, and that totally makes sense, because if you think about it, in the comics, I believe it was called the Dark Avengers, and he was War Machine. Norman Osborn was War Machine, or was he the Iron Patriot? He might have actually been the Iron Patriot. It was one of the two, but I mean, I know it's the same character in a way. But he was, I think it was Iron Patriot in the Dark Avengers, and he kind of, it's almost like he infiltrated the Avengers in a way, kind of made this other group, and then used it to do other things that he wanted. I don't think we're going to get that, but the reason I'm saying that is I think we are going to get a character that he is very much problematic in multiple different films, not even just limited to Spider-Man and Avengers, but possibly others, where his name will come up, or maybe he'll be in the next Captain America with, you know, Sam and Bucky. That's totally possible. Maybe he doesn't like Wakanda, so he's brought up in Black Panther. So, you know, that those type of things I do, or Doctor Strange is in New York City. Maybe he doesn't like Doctor Strange, so those type of things. I think he's going to be that type of character. So again, because of that, you cannot introduce him late in the game. You can't introduce him, and think about it. Spider-Man 3 is Phase 4. And even though, see, it's going to be interesting, because Phase 4 is over a span of 5 years. We know that. We're going to be learning what movies are coming out in just a few weeks. But do we have, because they were doing every 2 years a Spider-Man film, which I think they stick to it. But if they do, that means we would get Spider-Man 3 and 4 in Phase 4. Phase 5 would be obviously Spider-Man 5 and 6, which that does fit. But again, because it's 5 years, do you wait a whole 5 years to introduce Norman Osborn? Because no matter what, towards the end of Phase 4, which would be year 4 or 5, and it's 2019 right now, and Phase 4 doesn't start till 2020. So no matter what, it's either 2024 or 2025, you wait that long to introduce Norman Osborn? I don't think you do. Because so many of the current Marvel characters, I think, will be exiting. If they do an Ant-Man movie, it would probably be one more Ant-Man movie, and that's it. If they even make it. Maybe he's only in Avengers 5, and then he'd be done. Black Panther, they have some time left. Doctor Strange, maybe two or three more appearances. That's probably all. Captain Marvel, they're saying multiple. I don't believe that. The guy, so Sam or Captain Falcon and them, probably 3, maybe max 5 more appearances. So it's kind of, if you understand the picture that I'm painting, it's kind of like, do you introduce Norman Osborn and the entire lineup of the Marvel superheroes is totally different? I just don't think you do. I don't think that makes sense. I think it makes sense. Tony Stark was a billionaire. He was a lot of good, right? He did a lot of good. He built a lot of different things. He created different initiatives. The Accords was sort of, in a way, not his idea, but he was a big pusher of it. So, in my opinion, what do you do now that you set up Peter Parker as the next Tony Stark? What do? You give him the anti-Tony Stark. You give like the world, you give the Avengers, you give Peter Parker someone who, very intelligent, has a lot of money. They can do a lot of different things, a lot of different bad things with that money. So you basically give him what would be the negative version of Tony Stark, and you think of what Tony Stark did for all of the first 10 years, the first 22 films, even 23 with Spider-Man Far From Home. You think of everything that he's done, all the creations that he's made, the sacrifices that he's made, everything that he has created, and now you kind of say, okay, and now let's pretend that you have someone who has almost similar, kind of not the same, but sort of similar attributes, but they're bad. They have ill intentions. That is kind of scary to think about. Which is exactly why I think it makes sense to do Norman Osborn. He, in my opinion, other than Doctor Doom, is the only character that can be that character, that could be the anti-Tony Stark, the negative version of Tony Stark that could cause many problems. It's also totally possible that they make Norman Osborn and Doctor Doom kind of acquaintances in a way. They kind of, maybe for like Avengers things, maybe they start to work together. I don't know. But I do think if you were to say choose one character that, or if Disney were to come to me or Marvel Studios came to me and they said Doctor Doom or Norman Osborn, choose which one fits this character more. Norman Osborn. That's just how I see it. I think Doctor Doom's a little bit different. So in my opinion, it only makes sense for Norman Osborn to be introduced in the next Spider-Man film, which would be coming out in 2021, because that's going to be right in the sort of in the first half. Well, it would definitely be the first half, but it would be not exactly in the middle of Phase 4. It would kind of be towards the start of Phase 4, which again, that kind of makes sense to kick off. Here's the new big bad who's going to be causing a lot of problems for the Avengers at the beginning of the phase. So I don't know. In my opinion, it makes sense. If they wait, I feel like it's a mistake. Because again, even though Norman Osborn will be all those things, now you add the Green Goblin element to that, which causes a lot of problems in other ways, especially for Spider-Man. And it messes with his mind and different things. It only makes sense to have that character there, so that way you can use him over multiple films in kind of the long run, but really between Phase 4 and Phase 5. So that's just how I'm seeing it. I think I'm right personally, but I'm hoping I'm right.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when it comes to a character as big as him, and like Tyler was saying towards the beginning of when he was talking, when you look at how many movies they have left, and you look at what even was supposed to happen, or like the leaks that led us astray in terms of the ending from Far From Home, you now lose this movie. 2 Spider-Man movies are gone, and there's no mention, there's no anything of like an actual Sinister Six or Norman Osborn, Green Goblin, whatever, and he is such a vital character and such a huge villain when you think of Spider-Man. You really do think of, the arch nemesis of Green Goblin, and also, connecting to what Tyler said too, having him be presented early so that he can be a much bigger villain, so that he can be a villain that can actually, kind of stand toe-to-toe in a way with the Avengers and future Avengers movies. You have to introduce this character sooner rather than later, and when it comes to the next Spider-Man movie, it's like, how many more movies can you go without introducing him? And I think it really stops here. I don't think you can go through the entire third movie, and we'll be talking about some of the ideas we have for who could appear in this third movie, and like Tyler's already said, like Miles is a huge one, but villain-wise too, you can only have so many people go through where then you really start to question, all right, you had Vulture, you have Mysterio. People know of these characters, but especially Vulture was kind of on the lower end. Obviously, a very popular character now, especially because they used him very, very, in the right way, and they used him really, really well. But you have these 2 villains, and it's like, all right, well, now if the third one goes by, and you have some other villain that's kind of lower on the chart, but they make cool, like that's all fine and good. But like, when are we getting these big characters, Doc Ock, Green Goblin, like these guys? And Green Goblin really does headline that list of villains. So you really need to figure out a way to bring them into the third one. I see it as, and Tyler and I had already talked about it, previously or without, it will never make the air on podcasts now, but we had talked about ideas of before when we thought that he could be in the second movie. When it comes to the third, it really seems like it would be a Norman Osborn film where he will be in it, and it'll be kind of his descent into being Green Goblin and that kind of journey of the character. I think that makes the most sense. So in terms of Green Goblin, like the villain with the mask or whatever, variation they choose to use of Green Goblin, however they choose to use him, I feel like that would happen at the end of 3. I think no matter what, my prediction would be we will get Green Goblin. We'll see what he looks like at the end of the third movie. And for the entirety of the third movie, we'll see Norman Osborn. We'll see who that character is. We'll learn about him, and we'll see, you know, how he becomes it, and he'll be, you know, the central villain for 4, and then we'll see, you know, where it goes from there. But I really don't think they can make the mistake, I guess you could call it, of leaving him out of 3. I really think, you know, again, you've gone through 2 villains, 2 very, very solid villains, but now it's time, you know, we're in Spider-Man's life. He's grown up. I mean, in a way, I mean, we really, if you think about when we saw him, he was very, very young. Now he's a little bit older. By the time this next Spider-Man film comes out, it'll be 4, and if you even count Civil War, it'll be like 4 or 5 years since we first saw Spider-Man. So it's enough into that character, it's enough into Peter Parker, where now we can really start to introduce, you know, the big bad villain, the one that really is going to oppose him. So I think it definitely would be a mistake to go through 3 without him, and honestly, I feel like that's my main reason. I like the reasons Tyler gave too. I mean, to introduce him, to then play that, you know, how he's got a lot of money, a lot of power, and to have him be popping up as, you know, enemies or even like small mentions in other standalone movies, and also possible Avengers. You know, could he make deals with other villains, and could it be like a 2-villain kind of movie Avengers film? Yeah, it could. Or, you know, just having him kind of there to be able to fund everything, that's very, very possible. So I think to introduce him sooner rather than later, so that you already know what his character is and who he is as we then get into the Avengers, so that he can, you know, participate in it. I think that's a really, really good idea, and honestly, putting him into the 3rd Spider-Man film is the quickest and also the best way of doing it. So guys, let us know in the comments below, what do you think? Do you think we're going to see Norman Osborn and Green Goblin in Spider-Man 3? How do you think he'll be used, and where do you think, you know, that's going to go forward in future Spider-Man films and Avengers films? Let us know, and make sure you guys subscribe to our YouTube channel podcast. Now hit that bell icon so you guys know when these videos go up. And again, we will be covering Spider-Man Far From Home. Tons of videos coming up on our channel. Over the next week, we got almost a video a day talking about all things, you know, towards the spoiler kind of things about Far From Home, and also all sorts of conversation about Spider-Man 3. So you can look out for those videos every single day, and we hope to see you guys there.